On Tuesday, May 3rd, the World Socialist Web Site interviewed Jeff Seeley, a maritime injury lawyer with Gordon, Elias, and Seeley. This firm represents the family of Karl Kleppinger, one of the 11 workers killed in the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig against Transocean, British Petroleum, and Halliburton. So Jeff, could you talk about some of the details of the case that your firm is currently working on?
Gladly. It concerns the offshore rig explosion that everybody has heard about. And ultimately, I think that there's going to be several culpable parties, or at least potential parties. In the course of this, we're prepared to prove that these parties are culpable, and we're doing this on behalf of a lady who lost her husband and her son.
Mm-hmm. As I understand it, your firm is pursuing charges of gross negligence against BP and Transocean and the other defendants in the case. Could you talk about what that term means and how it applies to this particular situation?
It really means a willful disregard for safety, and I think ultimately, once all the facts are investigated, there will be depositions, there will be document production, there's going to be an investigation by the government and the Coast Guard, there's going to be internal investigations from various companies. I think that we will find, if I can predict the future, that these companies made very serious mistakes, reckless mistakes. They did that for sake of profit, to take advantage of safety. This is a rig that they lease for $500,000 a day. Ultimately, BP doesn't want that rig out there a day longer. And we believe at the end of the day that we'll prove that this job was being rushed and it was a reckless disregard for safety that ultimately caused this accident.
You're up against some powerful companies with BP and Transocean. And it looks like you're in for quite a fight. What do you think is going to be their response?
I think we'll expect a huge response. In fact, and I think this is one of the more tragic things that I've heard, beyond of witnessing this human tragedy of my client. And the tragedy is this: when this accident happens, instead of taking all those survivors to shore to see their families, people that had lots of questions about whether or not they were survivors. Instead of doing that, they took more than 100 survivors to an adjacent platform, 4 hours away. Mind you that they were only 52 miles from shore, just a couple hours from shore to their families. They had flown private lawyers from outside law firms out to this family to start taking statements from all these 100 survivors. And again, hundreds of survivors that had not even had the opportunity to speak with their families. Instead of allowing them to do that, they went and hired a bunch of lawyers to take statements of them. So it's going to be a big fight.
So what's your opinion of the response of the Obama administration to this catastrophe?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm surprised that the response didn't come more quickly. Day went by, and we never heard anything from the administration about the lives that were lost and the survivors that are still struggling out there. And to this day, I've never heard anything from a public perspective from President Obama about all of the human tragedy that we've seen.
So in your opinion, what has been the conduct of Transocean and the other defendants in this case in terms of preserving evidence and seeking to let the public know exactly what happened?
I think they've got a lot of problems on their hands, and the most immediate one is this devastation of the Gulf right now. Mm-hmm. It sounds blunt, but we can't bring these lives back in as much as we want to. I mean, the only way that we can right that wrong is through litigation to provide something for these families, and it's never good enough. And that's what's hard about my job, is I can't bring people back. I can only bring them compensation. But the companies haven't been focused on that issue. What they've been focused on are literally thousands of barrels of oil coming out of the seafloor. We had heard over the weekend or a week ago that the oil was going to stop, and now it's coming at greater and greater levels. Some predict that the Gulf of Mexico is never going to look the same way again.
This disaster comes just about a month after President Obama supported a law that would help expand offshore deep-sea drilling. So could you elaborate on that?
They did. In various coasts, including off the coast of Virginia, Obama allowed additional drilling that companies were not allowed to do before. And frankly, when you talk about Obama and his reaction to this problem, I think it was a political issue. He would have faced very difficult questions by reporters such as yourself that would ask, in light of the fact that there's going to be more drilling off our shores, are you concerned that accidents like this are going to happen again? That's what he would be worried about, and those are the questions that he did not face because he never really came to the forefront to answer questions.
So what has been the company's position in terms of its role in this and its liability?
Not surprisingly, it's been a lot of finger pointing. Transocean thinks it's other people's fault, not theirs. BP has said specifically this was a Transocean rig, a Transocean operation. BP hired Transocean to do or drill this well for them. That's been BP's response. Most recently, we've heard from a Transocean employee on an interview just like this, in which he said that this was essentially a freak accident where natural gas was coming out in large quantities from the seafloor, and it was unexpected. But in those situations, what you have in place is a blowout preventer to stop something like this. Just like a fuse in your car or a breaker in your home stops electricity, a blowout preventer is meant to stop something like this. And it failed, and whoever made that, the name's Cameron, they may be at fault, or they may have had the wrong blowout preventer there. What I do know is this is a very foreseeable situation in which natural gas is coming from the seafloor, and a company is big that makes billions of dollars out offshore like this. Both of these companies have a responsibility to make sure that that phenomenon doesn't kill and hurt people.
So what you're saying is that the story that the company is using, that this was a completely unforeseeable disaster that no one had any idea about. You're saying it doesn't hold water.
It doesn't hold water. If you're out there literally making billions of dollars, putting a rig in a very complicated deep water situation in which you know there's going to be millions of MCF of natural gas coming out of the seafloor, you have a responsibility to do that safely, and if you can't do that safely, you shouldn't be drilling there, period.